Now let's take a look at a date example, and then we'll talk about some of the problems with our output once we do this. So I'm going to do a File, New Project, and I want to have Windows Form Application chose. You choose Visual C# over here if you haven't got it chose already. And I'm going to come over here and I'll say the date example. Maybe I should start with example. Okay, example, date, input. Now click OK. Now what we're going to ask is we're going to ask the user to input the month, the day, and the year, and we're going to return the date formatted with slashes between them. Okay, so I'm going to put my mouse down here in the lower hand corner until it becomes a double arrow there, and I click and hold down my left mouse button, make this a little bit bigger. Okay, and I'm going to have a label. There it is. So double click that. I'm actually going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 labels. 5 labels maybe. So we put 5 on there. So I'll double click it. You'll see each time it says label 1, label 2, label 3, label 4, label 5. Now, I'm going to move these here in a minute, but they're kind of small for me. I can't see real well. So what I can do, you see if I click this one time, it selects it. If I choose this, it selects it. And our properties are down here for that particular item. But if I click up here and hold down my left mouse button and drag and draw a rectangle, it allows me to choose all 5 of them. So I can change the properties for all 5 in one time. And that works out well if you want to change fonts, for example. So if I come over to the properties here, expand that in a font. There it is, size. I want to change that to, let's say, 20. And press enter. Then you see it changes them all at once. So that's kind of handy. Okay, so for label 1, I click that one time, and this is going to be, I guess, the month. I guess that's the logical one to ask first. So I come over here, I'll scroll down in the properties until I see text, and I'll change this to say month. Now for label 2, it should, if I choose it, then the text is already over here, and I can say day. And choose label 3, and I can choose this and change this to year. And this is going to be our date. So I'm going to have this say date. There we go. Now this is where I'm going to put my date at. So let me move these down a little bit. When you move them, like here, and you want things to line up as they become lined up on the bottom, then you see a little line go across. If I come from the bottom, you see it does that. If I'm coming from the side, see, so it doesn't matter where you're coming from there, it'll try to line up the bottom. Now, if I'm moving it over here, see how it lines up with the sides there. So it tries to guess on the position on which one you want to line up. Okay, so I'll leave that there. Label 5 isn't very nice to work with, so let me change the text. They say something like mm/dd/ and then y. Okay. That's going to be our output. That's where we're going to put our answer. They'll input the month, day, and year. They'll click a button, and it'll put it in the right format. Well, obviously, I need a button, so I'll double-click button here and then drag it. And I'll have that for the text to say format. Can't really see that very well, so let me come up here to the font and change that to, I don't know, 15 maybe. I'm going to resize my button so I can actually see it. Okay. Now we need some text boxes here. Text boxes allows the user to input the result. So double click one of those again and again. Now, this one I'm moving, I clicked it and grabbed it and dragged it, and it says text box 3. Now, if I click and drag this one, now notice as I move it right there, it's lining up with the bottom of the day, and then it's lining up with the other text box. So again, very useful to help you to line things up like they should be. You know, if you got over here and things aren't lined up, then you just keep moving it until they are lined up, and it kind of snaps in place. So it isn't like a real precise thing, like if you move a little bit off it, it's no longer lined up. It assumes you want to line things up and you want things to look consistent. Now I'm going to click my form here one time, and I'm going to resize this. Okay. Now that's our input. So let me run it. So click Start. And okay, it pops up here. I'll move it over here so you can see it's this. And for my month, let's see, I put 11 in. There's 11. And day is 28. And year, let's say, is 1992. Okay. Now, I'm right here. If I click Tab, it goes down to here. If I click Tab again, it goes down to here. If I click a button, it doesn't do anything because there's no code there. So let me click the X to close that application. If, on the other hand, I had moved these boxes so they're in this order. Looks the same, doesn't it? But now if I start it to run it, I come up here to the month, I put 11, and then I do a tab, it goes down to the year. And so then I'd have to enter in whatever year and then the date, or day like that. The tab order is based upon how you added it to the form. For now, just remember that the numbering of them, initial numbering of them, tells the order of the tab. Like this one here was called text box 1 if I look over in properties. This one was called text box 2, and this one is called text box 3. So that'll be the assumed tab ordering. There's actually a tab index here, number-wise, that controls when you press the tab, where does it go to. So that if I, for example, this one, if I look at the tab, this one says 6. This one says 7, and this one says 8. Some of these, like the month, you see a tab index says 0. This one says tab index of 1 and tab index of 2. But tabbing to a label doesn't make any sense. So even though they got a tab index, doesn't mean they'll actually do anything. And then probably after I choose this one, since there's nothing else really to tab to, probably my button would go to it. Now this tells you your tab index is 5. So let's see if that's true. To begin with, maybe the tab is set on that. Okay, I'm running it. Do you see my cursor in the month? You don't, do you? Specifically, you see how the button looks? It's got a little darker. The tab is currently sitting on this. So if I press tab one time, it'll put the cursor here, one more time here, one more time here. So if I want to change that, very simple. You know, this tab's index is currently 5. Let's change it to, I don't know, 15. It doesn't matter what you put there, because it just tries to do the numbering. Here's 6, here's 7, here's 8, and then even though this is 15, we don't have 15 components, it should still work fine. So if I run that, you now see that my cursor is sitting in the first blank. Now this is very handy. Some people don't like to use the mouse to manipulate or maneuver around the screen. So if I put in 11 here, I put in 28 here, 2012, and then if I do another tab, it's down there with my button. Now I could simply just press my space bar and that would choose the button. And I wouldn't even have to use a mouse. Okay. May not seem like a big thing to you, but if you're designing a computer screen for somebody who's doing data entry, that's invaluable. Okay, now let's put some code behind this. It's nice and pretty and everything. Actually, see how form says form 1? I'm going to click the form one time and change its text to say date example. And so now you see it says date example at the top. Okay. Now I'm going to reference whatever they put in these text boxes. So I want to give these names. Now the book will give you a naming convention. I'll use my own. You should develop some kind of convention, whether you take the books or you take mine or you develop your own. Just something that works well with you so you can wrap your mind around the coding. Okay, now if I after I choose a month, click it one time and then come over here. You see how name is at the very top. I scrolled to the top. It has parentheses around it, and it's called text box 1. Not very useful. My convention is I'm gonna do TB underscore TB for text box, and then what I'm accessing, which is a month. This next one, I'm gonna change its name to TB underscore day. This one, I'm going to refer to it as TB year. Now, even though we're going to put code behind the button, we're not actually going to reference the button. So I'm not going to change its name. It's fine what it's called. But I'm going to change this, so I'm going to need to give it a name. It says label 5. Well, that's not very useful. So I'll call it LB for label and format date. Don't put any spaces in these names. Don't start them with numbers. Don't put weird characters in here. Try to keep it pretty straightforward. If you want a space there, so it says format space date, you usually put an underscore. And if you follow the conventions I give you all through this class, you'll find that this will work across the board and pretty much every programming language you'll run across. So you don't have to keep there and keep modifying it to whatever you're working with. Okay, now that I got everything named, we're going to program the button click. And I could double click this, or over here in our properties window, if you click the lightning bolt, it says events. Then you see you got click here, and there's a lot of different things you can program: drag, drop, auto size change, and so forth. But if I come over here and double click the click, then it'll bring that up. Now that's especially helpful if you're trying to program an event that isn't one of the most common ones, because when you double click the control, it'll bring up the most common event that you'd want to program. Okay, now we need to declare some variables. Imagine this. You run up to me on the street. Now, I'm not a very sharp individual. Computer's not a very sharp individual. And you're going to ask me to add two numbers together. And so I might ask you, okay, what's the first number? You tell me 3. And that's okay, what's the second number? You tell me 4. Well, all of a sudden I forgot the 3 because I'm not a very sharp individual. I need to either write that 3 down on a piece of paper or put it into a memory cell in my brain. So the computer, again, is not a very sharp individual, so we need to program those memory cells. They're called variables. And so I'm going to declare it by doing string. String means that it can contain letters, numbers, all kinds of special characters. And we're going to have day, we're going to have month, we'll have year, and then we'll have our formatted date. So you can declare multiple variables on one line like that. All of these would be declared a string. Okay, so now I've set aside these brain cells in my head. I come up to you and I say, okay, what's the first number? You say 3. I then take that 3 and I store it into one of my brain cells. Well, same thing here. We're going to take, for example, day equals, and I'm going to modify this later on, but then I'll put in TB underscore day dot text. Now sometimes you need parentheses, sometimes you don't. You see how mine's in red now? It must mean that I don't need those parentheses. So let me get rid of those. Those actually refer to when you got a method, and text is not a method. Those are invaluable. Now I'm going to come up here and do tools, options, And there's different options you have here. You have general, auto, so forth. Fonts and colors. So you got a text editor and then a font. I'm going to choose this to 16 and doing OK. So you can see it a little bit better. Now I'm showing you that specifically for this example so that if you need to make yours a little bit larger, you can. Or if you need to make it smaller, your eyes are fantastic, you can. Okay. So this is what this is going to do. TB_day refers, and to switch back and forth in design and coding, you click the tabs up here. TB_day refers to this box right here that we named TB_day. When we say .text, it's accessing, and if I click the properties, it's accessing the text property. Where's it at? Oh, I still haven't clicked it. There. Well, which one is it? Oh, properties there. My eyes aren't very good. Okay, there's a text property. So that's the one it's accessing. Now, some of these you can access directly. Some of them have to access in a little different manner. But in theory, all of them you can query. You can get input from. Okay, so go back to my code. Again, this is accessing that text box and it's retrieving whatever is put into the text box. That's what the text is called. And it's assigning it to this variable, day, which we declared as a string up here. Okay, so then I think of it if I was adding to another number, I'd ask you what that number was, so I need to put in a brain cell. Same thing for month. You know, the month needs to be put into a variable. Brain cell of the computer. Or the computer program, I should say. And then day also, or year. TB_year dot text. By naming them all starting with TB, whenever I type TB, it puts up the list of items, and I can choose from them. That's why developing a naming convention, and I think the book has it where it's at the end. I don't like it at the end. It should be at the beginning, because that makes it very nice and IntelliSense. When you type TB, it'll pop up that list. Now, notice format date has a little green squiggly under it. That means that there's something wrong. It's not an error. Red is an error. But if I put my mouse over it, it says the variable format date is declared but never used. Well, we're getting ready to use it, but I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so format date equals day plus, and I'm going to put a quote here, plus, except for I guess month actually comes first, doesn't it? Month plus, and then I'll put a quote, plus day plus, quote, plus year. Okay, and what this is doing is it's accessing the value that's stored in month, it's accessing the value stored in day, and it's accessing the value stored in year. And these pluses you see here are concatenating these together. So it should put the month / day / year. Well, again, going back to my simple number example, I ask you what the first number is. You tell me 3. I store it in a brain cell. I ask you what the second number is. You tell me 4. I store it in a brain cell. In my head, I want to sit there and calculate those. I want to add them together. So 3 plus 4 is 7. And then I want to return the result to you. Well, we've just created a format date and we built it. Now we need to return the result to the user. And we looked at the message box before, but message box is not very useful. A better way is to return it into a component on your form. So I'll do LB. Remember I named that one LB_format_date. And then I'll do .text. So I'm assigning the text to it. And that's going to equal to format date. Okay, now we're ready to run this and see if it works. I don't always write code correctly the first time, so let's see what happens. So if I click start, pops up in my box here. Month 11, days 28, year is 2012. And I'll click format. I got a problem there, don't I? See how I got 28/28/2012? Well, the day and the year are correct, but my month is wrong. Well, let's go back to our code. Month is wrong. Look what I put. TB underscore day. I didn't mean to do that. It's actually good. I like doing this on the fly because then I do have these errors pop up and you can see, well, how do you identify whether you did it right or not? Well, this should actually be TB underscore month. So I'll change that. Now let's run it. Notice how the naming is invaluable. If I name this day and I name my text box TB underscore day, it's really hard to mess it up. In fact, I didn't get much sleep last night. Maybe that's why I screwed that up. It's hard to say. Okay, if I run it then, comes up here. For the month, I'll put 11 in there, then 28, and then 2012. If I click Format, 11/28/2012. So it works good. Now, if I come up here for the day, if I change this to 5, for example, and click that, it gives me this. Maybe that's what I want. Maybe that's not what I want. Maybe I want a 05. We'll talk about different formatting later on. But that shows you a date example for working with some of the text boxes and how to work with the variables.